Hi, it's Nancy. Many of our friends have been wondering what we've been up to lately, and so I decided to shoot a video to show you. We have moved to north central Utah, and we live in a nice suburban area with a decent sized backyard, but not one that's really conducive to a big garden. And with everything going on in the world today, we wanted to be able to grow some of our own food, provide some of our own produce, so that we weren't completely dependent upon the grocery store or the produce co-op that we run. So we decided to get a greenhouse and to build some raised beds and to put some plants in the ground. Now, because of our elevation, our last average frost date is in the middle of May, and we actually even came close to a frost this past weekend, the beginning of June, when we had some lows in the 30s and we had some sleet and even some hail. So our the fact that we have a much later start than other areas of the country is not um, it's not unusual for this area. So we put our plants in the ground on May 11th, which was about 4 weeks ago, and we planted our seeds around that same time. We put our herbs in their buckets about 6 weeks ago in the end of April. And so as I show you some of those, that'll give you an idea of how long we have had some of these things in the garden. So let's take a look and see how our garden is. Here we have some of our herbs that are planted in pots. I have dillweed and rosemary and lavender, my sweet basil, and my one lone jalapeno. I planted him in its own pot, in its own bucket, because I didn't want the heat from the jalapeno to affect any of the other plants in my garden bed. Notice each of these buckets has a liner in it. We took regular 5-gallon buckets and drilled holes in the bottom. We put rocks in the bottom for drainage, and then we lined them with paint filters. They're 5-gallon bucket paint filters. They keep the dirt in but let the water go out. Now the dirt that we're using is a organic potting mix that has additional nutrients that we've added in so that we can feed our plants. All of these plants were started in little 3-inch pots that I got from Home Depot, and they have grown tremendously. They've been in these buckets probably about 4 or 5 weeks. Now let's take a look at the other herbs that I have. There on the other side, we have spearmint and peppermint in their own boxes, and you can see how they have taken over their whole bucket, and they are very invasive, and you really don't want them in with your regular garden because they will take over, and they will really take over and choke out your other plants. But there's my peppermint, and then I have this wonderful thyme, and all of these are just so fragrant. If you go along and just pet the leaves, just grab the leaves, and then you can sniff your hand and you can smell the wonderful aroma of the herbs. We have an amazing Italian oregano here, and then flat Italian parsley, and then I have my cilantro, and as you can see, my cilantro has bolted. Cilantro doesn't like heat, and we had a week with some very, very high temperatures, and so now my cilantro has gone to flower and will be going to seed. We'll see what we decide to do with that as the season progresses. Now, our greenhouse itself, we have a greenhouse. Let me back up here so you can see. The greenhouse is a 10 by 12 Harbor Freight greenhouse that we have mounted, that we have just put on the concrete parking pad behind our house. And we didn't want to put anything down into the concrete to hold it down, so we built these raised bed boxes on 3 sides, and we actually have bolted the greenhouse to those boxes. Those boxes, once they're full of the dirt and the plants and everything, this greenhouse isn't going anywhere. We had some amazing winds come through with a storm. The greenhouse was perfectly fine. It did wonderfully. So let's talk a little bit about my boxes and how I have these raised beds set up. Right now I have my drip irrigation or my soaker hose running, and we actually have it go down around the inside of the box and then come back around and come around the outside so that everything gets plenty of water, because this dirt that we filled it with is very porous and it lets the excess water flow right through. As you can see, we have strings set up, and they allow they mark off 1 square foot sections of the box. The actual opening in the box is 2 feet across, and we are doing what's called square foot gardening here, and that's where you mark off a square foot section and then decide what kind of plant you want to put in each square foot. And depending on what the plant is, you can that square foot will support anywhere from 1 to 16 plants of that variety. The big plants that you see in my box right now all came from 3-inch pots that I got from the store. The smaller plants were all planted from seed. I still have some empty spaces on my tomato row because I started some seeds inside the greenhouse after we got the greenhouse built, and they are really tiny, and we'll have to see how they turn out. We'll talk about those in a little bit. But what I have here at the beginning, this first corner, these are sunflowers. And these are sunflowers that are going to get really tall, and we will support them on this trellis as they grow up. They will get taller than the top of this greenhouse. And then the back row along this trellis is all tomatoes and types of tomatoes. This particular one is a slicer tomato. I think it's an early girl. And then I have several spaces for more tomatoes. But then this is a cherry tomato. This is a sweet million cherry tomato. Look at all those blossoms. And if you look and get down in here, you can see that I have some great little green tomatoes forming. And those are going to be wonderful groups of cherry tomatoes that we'll be able to harvest in a few weeks. Coming along the back here, we have some Roma tomatoes. I planted a couple of Romas, and I've recently come through and pruned them to prune off the low-lying branches to keep them off of the ground so that they don't get splashed back when it rains, and so that they can put all of their energy and efforts into growing up. You can see I have a number of blossoms here, and we have some more that are going to be starting here. I should be getting lots of Romas from this tree, these plants rather, and I'm tying them up with these plastic coated wires to help them hold up to the trellis netting. I think in next year I will actually plant them a little farther back and make sure that they are on the back side of this pole, because they all seem to want to migrate toward the middle of the box. And if they're on the back side of the pole, then they lean up against the trellis instead of having to be pulled back toward the trellis. So I have both of these plants were the same age and the same size when they started. I'm not sure why this one is doing so much greater than that one, but it is coming along nicely. Now, the rest of the plants here, I have peppers. These big plants here are peppers, and I wanted to have all the different varieties. So I have red and orange and yellow and green peppers, and all along the front of each of the boxes, I have planted radishes. Now, in some of the square feet, the radishes came up great, and in others, they just didn't materialize at all. As you can see, I have some beets here, and these are some carrots. It took a while for the carrots to come up. They're still really tiny. These are Danvers carrots. They're an heirloom variety. And then I have some onions that I'm growing here. You can barely see them. They are so tiny and thin, but they are finally growing. And down here we have, oh my, I have a grandchild who has pulled my stick out. So I will have to see what it is that I'm growing here. Interesting. I think that's more carrots. I think those are kaleidoscope carrots, actually. I planted some regular peppers from seed. These are California Wonders. So we will figure out which one of these pepper plants, probably this one, that we'll keep, and we will pull out the others. We will thin them so that that 1 square foot only has to support that pepper plant. I planted the radishes because radishes are really good companion plants for the edge for these peppers, and they seem to be doing fairly well. I have some leeks that I've planted, and I have one little plant that's coming up here, if you can see. Not sure where the rest are. I don't know if the birds have gotten to them or if they just haven't sprouted yet. They might take a little longer. And this little fella right here, this was supposed to be an okra, but he looks an awful lot like these radishes. This one might be the okra. We'll see if we actually get any okra plants to grow here. And we're back to some more onions. Now in this corner, I have watermelons. Now, watermelons in the corner of the bed. The reason I did this is because as you can see, the soaker hoses weave back and forth. Watermelons and melons in general need lots of water. And so I put them in the corner so that I knew I could put lots of the soaker hoses there. And we have several different watermelon plants that are planted there. And if you notice, the trellis actually makes a V across the section. So we will have lots of area for that watermelon to climb up the trellis. Now, how do we support the melons? What do we do when we get to melons? How do we keep those melons supported? Well, you can do something as simple as taking some old nylons or strips of t-shirts, and you make a sling or a hammock to hold those melons, and you tie them up to the different parts of the trellis so that you can have support, and so they can continue to grow and get big, but then they won't just pull off too early. Now, as we come along to the back side of the greenhouse, we have an area that is in the shade for most of the morning. And for about 2 hours a day, it gets sunlight before the sun moves a little farther and the greenhouse starts to shade it again. And so this is where I planted my peas. Peas are generally a cool weather crop, and they don't need a lot of that sun beating down on them because it's just too hot. And I have found, at least what I'm trying to do this year, is to see if these peas will grow during the summer and grow up the trellis and give us a good harvest because they have the shade. We have some bush beans here and some lemon balm. And then the whole back row is peas. And these at this end are Lincoln peas. And the ones down here are garden sweet peas. The garden sweet peas are almost twice as big as the Lincoln peas. And they have already found the trellis and they are starting to work their way up. You can see the little tendrils that are coming off of these plants, and they are going to reach out and try to find something to grow onto and to grow up. And if you can just point them in the right direction so that they will find this trellis, they will just grow right up the back of this, and we'll have some wonderful peas. Now, along the front, I planted spinach, which is coming up very nicely and is doing a great job. Of course, along the outside edges, some radishes, again, a different variety. I planted some spinach, and here's some lettuce. This is romaine in these 2 square feet. And then I planted some black Simpson, black-seeded Simpson lettuce here, and I'm not sure what's going on. There's not a lot that's coming up, and I don't know why. I did it with a seed tape, and you can see some residue of the seed tape here, and I don't know if it's because it hasn't gotten enough moisture back on this part of the the garden bed, because the soaker hose, notice how it gets it dark and moist all the way over here and all the way here, but I'm thinking it's missing that point. So I may have to hand water that for a while. But I also know that grandchildren came along and they like to pull on the white from the seed tape. You can see this poor little pea here. This one is, it's all dried up and dead. I don't know what's going on with it, but we're going to take it out, and he'll just, we'll just let the nutrients go for the rest of the peas. But here we have some more spinach again, and the spinach down here is growing really well. And of course, it's the area around where the soaker hose is. So I almost need 3 soaker hoses, one in the middle of each square foot, and one's right down the middle of the garden bed. So, we'll learn about that and we'll see how that goes. We have some bee balm at this end. Now I planted the lemon balm and the bee balm because they're supposed to help keep away some of the pests that will bother some of my melons. So we'll see if that works. We'll just, this is an experiment year, and we'll see what happens. We have some more bush beans back here. Now in this corner, just like we had watermelons in the other one, I have some cantaloupes. And if you can see, I have this poor cantaloupe with this hole in its leaf. This is not bug damage. This is hail damage. We had a hailstorm come through here this past weekend, and I have a number of holes through my plants, and I thought that my garden had been invaded by a bunch of pests, because I have found a couple of little worms, and I've pulled those right away. And but this was actually hail damage from this storm. Now on this other side, we get a little bit of shade in the afternoons on this side. The other side is sunny all day long. That's where the tomatoes and the peppers are. But this side gets a little bit of shade, a lot of morning sun, and it'll give late afternoon sun. But in the heat of the day, like it is right now, it's a little shaded. And we'll see how that works out for some of these. I have some cucumbers. I have 3 different varieties of cucumbers I'm growing. Muncher cucumbers, which are right here, and straight 8s. They're coming in and they're looking great. And some Boston picklings. Now this particular one came from a plant. It was a plant start, and the square foot next to it were the ones that I planted directly into the box. So we'll see. You can see they're probably a few weeks behind, but we'll see how they turn out as far as what they produce. You can see that this Boston pickling cucumber has these tendrils again, and they are reaching out, trying to find something to hold on to and something to grow up on. And so we want them to grow up onto this lattice work. And so I just take them and ever so gently wrap it around and give it a little bit of help. As you can see, this one tendril already found its own way and has knotted itself all up inside the knot on this lattice work. We have some more elms. We have some elm trees that dropped lots of little whirligigs all over our yard, and we thought we got most of the seeds out, but everywhere I go I'm finding these little baby elm trees that I'm having to pull out. Last thing I need in my garden is an elm tree growing up. Oh, we finally have some celery coming up, little tiny things of celery, and it's been almost a month since I planted them. It's so nice to see them coming up. I have some right here on the back side of the soaker hose, and I have some out here. And then these carrots, these kaleidoscope carrots. This kaleidoscope is actually a mix of a bunch of different carrots. So some of these will be purple and some orange and some white, some maybe yellow. It'll be interesting to see what we get out of these when it comes time to harvest. Now my chives, these are actual real chives, not green onion stalks, which is what a lot of people think of as chives. These chives, again, these started out as a little 3-inch pot, and they have just taken off lately. Same with the lemongrass. Lemongrass is really good, nice herb to have, and it's actually good for your garden and good at keeping away some pests as well, and it is doing phenomenal. Now coming into my squash, I have 2 square feet of spaghetti squash here, and look at these. They are just getting so big. I need to go and find out how many of these spaghetti squash I'm supposed to have per square foot, and I need to start thinning them out before they get too big and picking the ones that I like the best and that I want, that's planted in the right place. I think this particular one right here, we might just move him to the back side of this dividing pole, and we might keep him and give him that whole square footage and hope that he will get big and grow really well. Now this big giant plant that I have here, see if I can zoom out so you can see it. This is a zucchini. One big zucchini. Now this zucchini, he wants to spread out and just take over the entire box, and I need him to grow up. And so I have taken the stems and I have tied them up, and hopefully I can actually get this zucchini squash to grow up and realize that if it grows up, it will get all of the light that it needs, while at the same time it can give me all of its little zucchinis down here. We'll see. I may have this is a Black Beauty heirloom zucchini. It may be one that doesn't want to grow up a trellis, and so we might have some problems with that. The square foot or right next to it is the same thing, but again it was planted by seeds, and you can see I have several of these plants, and I just need to pick which one I want to have and keep in that square foot. I think I only get one of those. And then this last section, this is a crookneck heirloom squash, a nice yellow squash. It's going to be a great summer squash, and again I'm trying to get it to grow up instead of out. So we'll see how well that works. And I have some little ones that are starting to grow here, and again we just have to make sure that they get enough room. And again I have some sunflowers at the corner. I'll probably just stick with one and have to thin the others. Now I have some beautiful basil that's coming up here. I have a square foot of basil, and I have some lovely beets. Look at how well they're doing. And the more green onions and more carrots. These are the Danvers carrots. The carrots and the onions and the beets on this side of the garden seem to be doing a little better. And I don't know if it's because they have some of that shade in the middle of the day, or I don't know if that's what it is or not, but they seem to be doing better than the ones that were planted by the peppers and the tomatoes. So we'll see how that goes. So there's the main garden. Now let's go and check out my potatoes. Here are my potatoes, and as you can see, they are in 32-gallon trash cans. Do you see those? Those are huge. So we started out with 6 inches of dirt at the bottom. We had a number of red tomatoes that were in boxes in our garage, and when we moved, they got stacked on top of each other under some onions, and they got buried in our new garage. And we didn't realize what was going on when we unburied them. They had these long stalks where they had grown 6 or 8 inches in each direction. I have so many of them. I still have so many. But we don't have a place to grow potatoes in the ground here. And so we decided we were going to put them into trash cans. Now, normally if the trash cans were out in a lot of sunlight, you would not want to put them in a black trash can. It will get too hot, and potatoes don't like that kind of heat. But where these are, they are on the side of the garage, and you can see where the sunlight hits them. In the mornings, they get sunlight, but it's a softer sunlight. It's not quite as hot. And then as the day progresses, they are put into shade, and they are in shade for the rest of the day. They get a fair number of hours of sunlight, probably 5 or more, but it's not the hot sunlight. And they are doing so wonderfully. We are about ready to put some more dirt on these. The way you grow potatoes in a trash can. Is you start with about 6 inches of dirt. Of course, we drilled holes in the bottoms of these just like we did our buckets. We put some rocks in the bottom. We lined them with this landscape fabric, this woven landscape fabric that lets water through but doesn't let the dirt through. It's the same thing we lined our garden beds with. And then you put the tubers down and then you bury them completely in dirt. And so we put another 6 inches on top because some of those stood up 6 inches, and we completely buried those. And then when they started to come out, it took a couple of weeks, but then they started to come up, and now we have these great, look at how tall they are. We need to put some more dirt in here and bring it up to about this point right here. So there's only a couple of inches of the plant left. When we do that, that will force it to create more roots. It'll take these and we'll grow more potatoes off of these. And so we need to do that this week. We'll probably be doing that today or tomorrow in each of these trash cans. You can do this in barrels, you can do it in big buckets, but our goal is to eventually fill them all the way up so that the dirt is all the way to the top, and then you let the plants grow. And then once the plants die out, then you harvest your potatoes. You dump them all out and you harvest all your potatoes. So we'll see how many we end up with. We have 3 trash cans full of potatoes. You can see we also have drilled drainage holes down the side. So we have drainage holes in the bottom, drainage holes in the side. It's all lined with this fabric so the water can drain and we don't get waterlogged rotting potato roots, but we can put a lot of water in there and keep the ground nice and moist so we can grow some fabulous potatoes. So that's where our garden is right now. It has been growing by leaps and bounds, and I know it's going to look different just a week from now. So I'll try to keep you updated on the progress that we're making and some of the new things that we're trying. We still have some things that we're going to be planting in some more buckets, and maybe I'll shoot a video showing how we do our buckets and what we put in them. I'd love to hear what you're doing in your garden and what your progress is and some of the things that you are planting and you're interested in. So share that in the comments below. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my inspiration, which is Jess from Roots and Refuge Farm. She has taught me so much about gardening and about what can be done. She has a lot more space than I do. I only have a little tiny space, but she has truly been my inspiration. You should totally check her out. Go give her a visit at Roots and Refuge Farm here on YouTube. Thanks for taking the time to hang out with us and to watch my garden tour. If there is anything in particular you'd like to see more of, or details you'd like to learn, or see how we make any of the things, or we created any of the things that we have here, let me know in the comments below. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. I will try to put out some more videos as the season progresses, and we'll try to keep you informed on the progress of the garden so that we can see how it actually progresses and what we actually get from this small amount of garden beds that we have. So thanks for spending some time with us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.